Hello and welcome to this episode of Bullseye, my weekly and continuous deep dive into issues of significance, issues that matter to Goa, and issues that need to give you clarity from clutter. Today, we are going to discuss an episode that has just happened. There's a jetty in Betul that collapsed. Now, this jetty was a portion of ONGC's rupees 100 crore project. And this jetty collapsed barely 6 months after the facility was used to ferry VIPs and delegates attending the India Energy Week 2026. The structure, built at ONGC's Advanced Training Institute campus near Betul, was projected as an important new sea access facility for one of the Union Petroleum Ministry's largest international events. It consisted of a floating pontoon measuring approximately 40.5 meters by 8 meters, a gangway and a ramp, elevators and a staircase connecting the jetty to the elevated ONGC campus and a waiting lounge at the top. While two support pillars have washed away and caused the pontoon to give way, ONGC has supposedly clarified, that the main lift structure and gangway were unaffected. The project has faced an ongoing and a very strong opposition from the rural fisherfolk regarding environmental concerns and potential impact on marine ecosystems, which I will get into later. Local activists point to a 2021 National Green Tribunal order that mandated environmental clearances for such projects. They allege that this procedure would have required an environmental impact assessment EIA to study effects on marine life and coastal zones, and this was skipped to complete the work in just 5 days. Valley MLA Cruz Silva and local boat owners have raised alarms about the debris potentially drifting and blocking the River Sal mouth before the fishing season begins. They have demanded immediate removal of the debris and an independent technical inquiry. Most importantly, there is a strong political and social demand to fix accountability for the 100 crores spent on what is being now perceived as a temporary and an unsafe structure. Opposition politicians are contrasting this expenditure with the government's 20-year delay in building a simple protective wall around the local Kudbon fishing jetty not too far away. Its purpose, the jetty that collapsed, its purpose during the India Energy Week was to allow select guests to move between resorts, vessels, and the event campus through the sea route. A facility of this nature, as you would know, is designed precisely for a marine movement, or a marine environment rather, which means wave action, tidal movement, wind, buoyancy, and load distribution. These are all important aspects, and unexpected hazards cannot be ruled out. Now look at the different versions of the incident by different authorities. The South Goa collector's initial explanation was that the elevator had become stuck, disturbing the balance of the structure and contributing to its failure. ONGC subsequently issued a different and a much more revealing clarification. It said that the jetty had never been formally commissioned. Let us pause, and I'm going to say this again. It said that the jetty was never formally commissioned. It remained under construction and had merely been made temporarily operational for the limited water transport during the India Energy Week. ONGC later added that the affected portion of the pontoon was undergoing work to increase its height when it was damaged during severe adverse weather and cyclonic sea conditions. And I'm going to delve into this sentence in much more detail. Damage during severe adverse weather and cyclonic sea conditions in a bit. But these official statements transformed the story. This was not merely a fully completed commissioned jetty encountering unforeseeable storm. ONGC itself says that the structure was unfinished, had not been formally commissioned, and had been temporarily used to transport people during Energy Week, and was still undergoing safety enhancement or height enhancement work nearly 6 months later. Therefore, the partial collapse of this floating jetty in Betul cannot be dismissed as yet another piece of minor infrastructure damaged by Goa's monsoon seas. The structure was conceived and built as part of ONGC's Sagar Setu facility, and it was used to transport VIPs and delegates, as I said, during the India Energy Week in January 2026. And importantly, and I pause to stress this, it was projected as a new maritime access point for a prestigious international event. But after the portion collapsed in July, ONGC clarified that the jetty was still under construction and, as I said, not fully commissioned. This point needs to be stressed again and again. This clarification does not reduce ONGC's responsibility. It actually makes the questions surrounding the project far more serious. If the jetty had not been completed and formally commissioned, on whose technical authority was it placed into temporary passenger service? What portions were complete and what portions were not complete? This is important. What tests were conducted and what restrictions were placed on its use? And most importantly, who signed the document declaring that VIPs and delegates could safely be transported through it? These questions are not based on mere speculation. They arise directly from ONGC's own position after the collapse of the jetty. The corporation said that the structure remained under construction and would be restored and formally commissioned only after meeting all prescribed safety and operational standards. If those standards were still to be fully met before commissioning, ONGC must explain precisely what standards, certifications, and restrictions were applied when the same unfinished facility was temporarily opened before the India Energy Week. This most important event predates the collapse. Now, this I'm going to tell you what predated the collapse. On December 17th, 2025, just 41 days before the India Energy Week was due to begin, ONGC's Advanced Training Institute issued an official expression of interest. The EOI invited guests outside the agencies to operate. The EOI invited outside agencies rather to operate, maintain, and market ONGC's new meetings, initiatives, conferences, and exhibition facilities in Betul. It described the 250-acre ONGC campus situated on a plateau approximately 30 to 40 meters above mean sea level, and listed the new convention center, the management and development hall, and so on and so forth, and the utility building and the jetty as part of the project. The language used by ONGC in this document is extremely important. It said that the buildings had been constructed with the support of the Engineers India Limited, and that the jetty was also under construction, and that all facilities were at an advanced stage of construction and quote unquote shall be in place for the India Energy Week from January 27th to January 30th, 2026. ONGC actually promoted that the campus would be accessible throughout the year by land, air, through a helipad with 4 parking points, and sea through this jetty equipped with the elevator option. Now, all this that I'm saying creates the first critical timeline for inquiry. On December 17th, the jetty was officially described as under construction. On January 27th, it was used as for the Energy Week. After the event, construction and safety enhancement of the jetty work continued. In July, while ONGC says the pontoon height was being raised, a portion failed. And after the failure, ONGC says that the jetty had never been formally commissioned. Now, the same ONGC document that I am relying on provides the exact physical description of the facility, which talks about this floating jetty measuring 40.5 meters by 8 meters, with access infrastructure consisting of elevators, staircase, gangway, ramp, and a waiting lounge. Significantly, the document also stated that the jetty carried a 1-year defect liability period with the contractor. That clause is extremely relevant. ONGC must disclose when the 1-year defect liability period legally commenced. Did it begin when the structure was temporarily used in January, when any provisional completion certificate was issued, or was it yet to begin because formal commissioning had not occurred? Please understand this, viewers. This is important. The defect liability clause is one of the most important clause in any project because it holds the contractor liable for defects. If the defect liability period had already started, the contractor is responsible contractually for rectifying the defects arising within this period, subject to the terms and conditions of the contract. This is important. Now, if it had not started, if the contract clause, the defect liability clause had not started, ONGC is effectively confirming that the structure was being used before contractual completion and handover process. This is again crucial. If it had not started the defect liability, ONGC is confirming that the structure was used before the contractual completion and handover process had been concluded. Now, this wording of this EOI that I'm referring to also contains an important distinction. ONGC said that the convention center, management facility, exhibition hall, utility building, and so on and so forth were under this 1-year defect liability period from Engineers India Limited, calculated from the date of commissioning. The jetty was treated separately. Its 1-year defect liability obligation was stated to be with the constructor or contractor. So while everything else was with Engineers India Limited, the jetty itself was stated to be with the contractor. This means that ONGC had known and always known the identity of the specific construction agency actually responsible for the jetty. That agency must now be named publicly. Why is it not being named? Why is that being hidden from everybody? The contract must also show what tests had to be completed before provisional completion and final commissioning. This is important. And which agency was authorized to certify each component of these tests? These questions become even more serious because the jetty included elevators climbing from the sea level to a campus situated 30 to 40 meters above the mean sea level. This was not a basic pontoon tied to the shore. It was an integrated marine and vertical access system in which the floating platform, gangway, lift structure, and elevated landing had to work together under changing tide and wave conditions. These are basic engineering conditions against which the structure was supposed to be designed and tested. When the jetty collapsed, the first public explanation attributed to the South Goa District Administration was that the lift had become stuck and this had altered the balance of the structure. ONGC later gave a different and a more detailed explanation, saying that the affected pontoon was undergoing house and height enhancement when adverse weather and conditions caused it to fail. I have repeated that. I'm repeating it again because this contradiction is very, very crucial. Now, when ONGC says that the jetty had been made temporarily operational during the India Energy Week after necessary safety conditions, after necessary safety considerations, quote unquote, one must underline this. This is not a political statement. When an organization like ONGC says that necessary safety considerations were met, this is merely an assurance, it's not a certificate. ONGC must identify those considerations. Were they recorded in a signed safety assessment? Did they include load and stability trials? Were operations prohibited beyond specified wind or wave conditions? Was the use of the elevator approved, restricted, or supervised? And these questions go out directly to you, ONGC. Therefore, these questions need to be answered. Now, also, let us look at this. The India Energy Week was not being treated merely as an isolated trial before a distant future commissioning. ONGC was already planning continuing commercial and event related utilization from February 1st. Yet, after the July collapse, ONGC says the jetty had not been commissioned. So, how were you planning, or may have even planned, event related utilization from February 1st when the jetty was not even completed by the first week of July? Now, this is extremely important and this answer has to be given. Now, let us look at the Energy Week itself and ask one question. If the jetty did not meet safety standards during the Indian Energy Week, what face would the government of Goa have had if there was any tragedy during that week? The Energy Week itself was really enormous. On November 24th, 2025, the Union Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas opened media registration and described the India Energy Week 2026 as the largest energy gathering of the year, expecting more than 75,000 energy professionals, 550 global speakers, more than 120 conference sessions, over 700 international and Indian exhibitors, at least 12 country pavilions, and 12 thematic zones. This is so important. This was a major global event. That scale matters. ONGC and the ministry were preparing to receive tens of thousands of participants, government representatives, business leaders, international exhibitors, and media personnel. The government's prestige was at stake. The sea route and jetty were promoted as part of the event's transport and access infrastructure, particularly for VIPs and delegates traveling from different resorts. This was not a simple situation where two engineers informally tested a small unfinished platform. The scale was much bigger. The campus facilities had to be visually ready, operationally usable, and capable of holding and supporting high level movement. And this is important. But ONGC's own December document says the structures were at an advanced stage of construction. And ONGC only gave an unequivocal assurance that they shall be in place. It did not say they would be in place after all statutory and engineering processes were complete. This is a big difference. If ONGC really meant that everything was placed, it should release the original jetty contract, construction schedule, completion certificates, test records, and the temporary operation approval. Let that be on the table right now. Goa is calling out to you to do that. Show the structure had passed every test required for this particular passenger you was authorized in January. Until then, ONGC's post-collapse clarification is not a defense. It is the strongest evidence requiring investigation. And this investigation has to happen not by ONGC, but by external agencies. There must also be a clarity on the financials of this project. It exceeded rupees 100 crore. And there must be clarity on whether this refers only to the jetty or to a wider Sagar Setu and access package. ONGC has not given a cost breakup. And that is important. The public needs a cost breakup of this rupees 100 crore. It should also disclose whether this pontoon height enhancement formed the part of the original bill of quantities, or was it an added term. This is important. The South Goa collector's initial account referred to the lift becoming stuck and shifting the balance. ONGC's later statement focused on pontoon high work and adverse weather. These two conflicting explanations must be reconciled. Also, this weather defense must be subjected to facts. This ONGC's defense of severe adverse weather and cyclonic conditions is not enough. It has not supplied the actual wind, speed, wave height, tidal level, and marine warnings that were applicable at that particular time. The words rough sea, cyclonic conditions are not fit for a proper scientific inquiry that need to be conducted. They are rough sea and cyclonic conditions are not engineering measurements. The inquiry must complete the actual recorded conditions with the environmental loads which the structure and its temporary construction arrangement was designed. If the conditions were within the approved design range, then the structure, the method of work, and the temporary securing arrangement has sadly failed. And if the conditions exceeded the design range, ONGC must show what storm protocol it used and applied when the warning was received. These are very important. ONGC cannot get away with this. Because a floating jetty at the mouth of the river Sal cannot be designed on the assumption of calm water throughout the year. And this is very, very vital. Now let's come to the Goa authorities. What must the Goa authorities answer? There is a navigational and environmental dimension to this whole issue. Fishermen in Betul and the river Sal have expressed concern that the damaged pontoons or debris could actually drift towards the river mouth, obstructing fishing vessels and creating a hazard. The site lies within a working coastal and a river ecosystem. It is not a private body. The captain of ports must disclose when it inspected the site, what navigation clearance it issued, what conditions were imposed, and whether it approved temporary passenger operations during the India Energy Week. Captain of ports, this goes out to you. Next, on our target, the Goa Coastal Zone Management Authority. It should similarly place the project's coastal permissions in the public domain. What was the approved footprint? Did the permission cover the pontoons, the gangway, and the elevators, and all of that? Were any conditions imposed concerning the fishing community, navigation, erosion, dredging, waste, emergency access? Were all these conditions complied with in the January operation? Our next target, the South Goa District Administration. It must state whether it issued or participated in any temporary operation clearance. The District Disaster Management Authority, police, fire, and emergency services may also have been involved because the facility was used to move high-profile delegates. What emergency plan existed in the event of a pontoon failure or an elevator malfunction, or a medical emergency, or a weather deterioration? Were drills conducted before the event? It is very unlikely. Therefore, all the project's permissions given by Goa authorities, or that should have been given by Goa authorities, need investigation. Captain of ports, GCZMA, district authorities, please place your approvals in the public domain. This is important. Then, some hard questions cannot be avoided. Fishing communities in this belt have waited for basic infrastructure, navigational protection, and improvements to working jetties. But when the union government organized a prestigious international event, an elaborate facility with elevators, a waiting lounge, and a sea route, the contrast is with no work being carried out at the very closely situated Kudbona jetty is absolutely shocking. And this is important. It shows where the government's priorities lie. Kudbona has been struggling for 20 years. this VIP jetty got done in 5 days. And this is relevant. And the reason why I'm mentioning this next segment is that there seems to be a complete pattern of any infrastructure projects that is carried out. Goa's roads provide the clearest measure of this gap between announcements and actual punishment. In September 2024, Chief Minister Pramod Sawant and the new PWD Minister Digambar Kamath publicly warned that contractors would be responsible for substandard roads and made to repair them free of cost, and they would be blacklisted. Now, the Chief Minister, when asked by the Legislative Assembly later, disclosed that not a single PWD contractor has been blacklisted for substandard roads during the preceding 5 years. The same disclosure said that 30 roads with minor defects had been repaired during the defect liability period. And this is important. The same questions of accountability being promised and accountability not being delivered. And this includes the Kala Academy demolition and the Kala Academy inquiry also. And this is important because right now, all these things are in the realm of inquiry without any proper justice. Because even though the contractor was blacklisted in the Kala Academy issue, an IIT Madras assessment reported multiple defects, including cracks in beams, columns, and so on and so forth. This is basically to state that whether it is the Kala Academy or whether it is the PWD or even the Porvory elevated corridor, which faced accidents when two people were critical, all of this have questions, but there are no solutions and inquiries are not complete. And this is important because the government's response always stops at the first administrative gesture. An inquiry is announced, a notice is issued, but then the system relies on public memory fading. The Betul case must not enter the same fog. ONGC's internal technical assessment may be necessary, but that cannot be the only investigation. You cannot expect ONGC to investigate itself. This is important. So also, let us look at what level the project is declared complete. When it's politically complete and a ribbon is cut, photographs are taken, lot of credit is taken. But when the project fails, contractors are blamed. Now, these are things that need to be completely understood. And this fallacy and this malaise has to stop. The state should create a register, a public register of infrastructure failures covering roads, bridges, public buildings, jetties, and construction sites. Every detail of the project, including the name of the contractor, date of completion, the nature of failure, the inquiry deadline, and all of that, including the punishment imposed, need to be there. These are very important. That is why this inquiry is very important. Finally, before we end, the River Sal fishing community should also be represented in the safety and navigation audit and review. These are people who use the water every day. They speak to the water. They understand the currents and tides. They understand monsoon behavior. There is nothing better than local intelligence. Their concerns cannot be confined to clearing debris after a failure when all design and operational decisions remain inside corporate offices. Fishermen of the River Sal have to be involved. And also, we must understand that at the core of this problem lies this closed environment where the government and the public sector, all of them work according to deadlines for VIP events. Larger ramifications are never planned. And that is why the ONGC has a serious case to answer. Finally, the sea may have provided the immediate physical force, but the sea did not write the contract. It did not set the Energy Week deadline. It did not approve temporary operations. It did not certify the structure. It did not decide to continue height enhancement work into the monsoons. These were human and institutional decisions, and human beings sitting in high offices and elevated chairs must be held to account and punished. This is Inc. Goa, And I'm Shujoy Gupta. Thank you for watching.